Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast and the Central Time Zone. Those following from Israel, from Europe, we want to wish you good evening. And it's been a very, very meaningful week here. We want to really today introduce an incredible guest, a thoughtful, incredible commander in the IDF, but his story is extremely unique. Chaim Meisels, who I have had the blessing of knowing and having spent time with, happens to be a scion of the famous Sighet Rebbe. Those of you who know Eli Wiesel, Sighet in Transylvania, depending on the year, was either part of Hungary, was part of Czechoslovakia. Sighet is a very, very significant community, famous Hasidic community, and it produced many, many great Jews, Eli Wiesel just being one of the many. Chaim himself grew up in the States, member of a Hasidic community, a Hasidic family. And unlike many Orthodox Jews who go into the IDF, he did not go through Netzach Yehuda. Netzach Yehuda is the famous Haredi battalion, which it's not just a battalion, it has 3,800 soldiers in the elite paratroopers, in the Air Force, in the Givati, in the Kvir. Chaim really went on his own. Chaim himself, as a young Hasidic American Jew, became a member of the elite Egoz unit. We're talking about elite infantry. And then he went on to becoming an officer, went to officer school, an officer in the Golani Infantry Unit. And he'll really tell you a little bit about his story in terms of his experience in the IDF, and as well, his experience commanding troops, commanding the platoons in Gaza for a number of months. We want to wish Chaim a mazel tov. He happens to be a new father. He and his wife gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. And it's really an honor to have Chaim with us. Chaim's an incredibly thoughtful Jew, has a fascinating background, and has really sacrificed both he and his soldiers in the Gaza during this war. Chaim, I'm going to hand it over to you, and please share with us a little bit of your background.
So good morning, thank you, appreciate that. I'm Chaim, as you said. I grew up in Williamsburg. My family was Satmar, still is Satmar. I didn't align as much as I grew up with everything that I was told at the beginning. When I was 19 and something, it was right before Tzuk Eitan. Tzuk Eitan was the previous war in 2014. If you guys remember, I believe Chatifat Shlosh Tanarim, Rabbi, you remember that probably, right? When 3 kids were held hostages and then they were found dead. At that time, I had a job in New York, and I felt that there's a war that's going to happen in Israel, and I wanted to be part of it. And I felt if I'm not going to do it now, I'm probably never going to do it. So I kind of, a little after that, I picked up myself, went to Israel. I got there in 2014. When I got to Israel, it was right before the war actually started. I drafted in August, which is when the war has been started already. I drafted in August to Michve Alon. Michve Alon is a 3-month program mainly for Americans, French, and Russians who did not grow up in Israel, grew up all over the world, and their Hebrew is not as good. I did 3 months over there, a half a day English, a half a day was studying Hebrew, and a half a day was basic training. And from there, I went to Golani first, and then after 2 weeks, I did the Gibush. I got into Egoz. I did most of the Maslul in Egoz, and then by the end, for officers, I went to Golani, and I went to become a command and then officer from the Golani Brigade already.
If I could jump in for just a second,
sure.
For those participating in the Zoom, one of the things that FIDF funds is these 2 fascinating bases, Michve Alon in the Galilee, as well as Chavat HaShomer. Michve Alon does many things. One of the phenomena on Michve Alon is that, as Chaim said, soldiers who are not fluent in Hebrew really can become up to snuff, can attain a fluency in Hebrew that enables them to participate in every dimension of the IDF. But there are many other things that happen on Michve Alon. Those soldiers who do not have a high school diploma, we fund their ability to have a high school diploma, get a job. On Michve Alon, there's an opportunity for young women who've had a very challenged background, in terms of they themselves having been in juvenile prison, having real problems, to find themselves. Many of the commanders on Michve Alon are female commanders who have a degree in social work and psychology, and they work, and they give these young women the ability to have self-respect, self-worth. 91% of all the participants in that program, Project Overcome, we call it, Project Overcome, 91% of them actually make it through, for a woman 2 years and 4 months, for a man 2 years and 8 months, their full service in the Army. It's the first time they've ever finished or completed anything. The base itself is a fascinating place. The base itself is really everything that's beautiful about the IDF and beautiful about Israel, because it gives people a second chance. And one of the many programs on that base that many American lone soldiers go to is the program which gives them the ability to become fluent in Hebrew. That's what Chaim mentioned. But when you hear through the FIDF formal education, when you hear Project Overcome, those programs actually take place on the very same base, Michve Alon. Sorry about that, Chaim.
Oh, perfect. That's my joining process. I don't know what you got. If you don't mind guiding me exactly where you want to focus on, and I'll help you with that.
You have most of your fellow soldiers in the elite Egoz, I assume, are Israeli. There might be a few from Chutz La'aretz, a few from the diaspora. So they hear about your background, as a scion of the famous, Sigurd Rebbe, a member of the famous Satmar community, a community that in America is an incredible community. The good that they do in the tri-state area for people in the hospitals, it has no bounds. This community does incredible things. But at the same time, this community is unique because it's not particularly Zionistic. In fact, it's anti-Zionistic. So when your fellow soldiers meet someone who's a scion of not just the community, but of the leadership of the community, it must have been a fascinating interaction. Can you share some of that with us?
So it's kind of unfortunate. There was only one other guy not from Israel in my unit, and he didn't survive. He passed away in the middle of training. And all the other guys in my unit, no one really knew what Satmar is. Like, in most of the guys that I was with, they looked at Hasidim and not Hasidim as the same. Like, religious was religious. There wasn't a lot of religious guys in my unit, and they didn't really understand. So kind of very fast, I was like, yeah, it doesn't really matter who I am. It's basically in how you perform and how you are a good human with other guys and how you work in war together or in training together. They really didn't understand or knew anything about my background. And also for a while I was trying to hide, in the beginning I filled it out, and then I was trying to hide it because I didn't want it to affect, nor was I looking to hurt my family that I'm there. So I was trying not to do too many things, and and kind of I don't want to attract attention in a way. So most of the guys in my unit didn't really know. Only later in my service, I met Harav Shah Friedman. I don't know if you know him. He was in 2014. Fascinating guy. He was the head of reserves in Tzuk Eitan. He's a Tataluf. He's a grandson of the Vishnitzer Rebbe. He's now a rabbi. He has a killing in Jerusalem now. So I met him later, and he did help me a lot.
Vishnitz also is in Romania. It's one of the great Hasidic dynasties that we have. It's a Romanian Hasidic, not that far from Sigurd, not that far from Satmar. Sorry.
Yeah, it had a lot of politics back then between them. So once I met him, he was probably the first high-rank commander that understood my background, and we kind of connected a little bit over that. But other than that, I think most people in my surrounding didn't even know what Satmar is, or that I had any connection to any big Hasidic families or communities.
How many years were you in terms of your Sedir, as a soldier, then as a commander?
Right. So I was about close to 6 years. Close to 6 years, because I did my training in Michve Alon, then Maslul Egoz, then commander's course. By the time I went to officers, I finished officers already after my 3 years. I finished officers when I was 3 years and a couple of months in, so they made me sign a little longer. So as an officer, I did a couple different jobs as an officer, and then I got out in the beginning of 2020. So I was in from 2014 until 2020.
And the role that you played as a commander, you were training primarily infantry soldiers?
I was mostly with infantry. Other than the last few months, I was in pilots course, helping them a little, training the pilots
Your
on basic
soldiers,
stuff.
I apologize. Your soldiers in the infantry, you were in Judea and Samaria, you were down in Gaza, you were up north, you were all over?
All over, literally almost all over, every couple months somewhere else. In Judea and Samaria, I did not spend as much time as I would like to. I spent only a couple weeks here and there, and I never had like a full-on cav, like a 4 month period in Judea and Samaria. Most of my time I spent or on the Lebanon border or on the Gaza border, and just the normal stuff over there, which is patrolling, sometimes small missions, but mainly on the borders. And then in training, I was a lot of the time.
So you come back to America, you get married, then October 7th happens. Can you share with us your experience from October 7th on?
Yeah. So first of all, when I got married, I told my wife I'm going to do 1 or 2 weeks miluim, and then I promise you the whole year, like the first year after our wedding, I'm not going to do any miluim. I'm going to tell the army that I need a break. I got to finish this year, and then I'll start doing miluim again. October 7th.
Participating, miluim is reserve duty.
Right. So on October 7th, my wife comes from a square family. Her parents live in New Square. So I went the second days, I went to New Square for Yontiv. I went to Shul, I'm davening.
Just if we can explain for everyone, the Skver Hasidic dynasty is a very, very significant Hasidic dynasty. Most Skver Jews are in Rockland County. That's one of the counties. It's a suburb of New York. But their influence, their impact is very significant. So you as a Satmar Chassid married a woman from the Skver Hasidic dynasty. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So I went there for Yontiv. I'm davening in Shul in the morning. My phone is not on Yontiv. There's no reason for me to check it. I'm davening about 11:30. One of the Hatzalah members, that is a friend of mine, he comes towards me and he's like, Chaim, I think something is going on in Israel. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, I don't know, we have like a non-Jewish ambulance driver. So Hatzalah, what they do in Square, when they drive a patient to the hospital, they're driving back, they have a non-Jew drive the ambulance back. So this guy tells the Hatzalah member that something is going on in Israel, and he sees on the news that there's a lot of Jews who were killed. So the guy comes to tell me if I know something or if maybe I'm called up. I say, I don't think that's true. It doesn't make any sense. It's way too many Jews. Let's tell me if you have anything more. 20 minutes later, he comes back and he's like, I'm telling you, he showed me on his phone there's pictures of a lot of dead Jews. I'm telling you, you should go check your phone. I walk home from shul. As I get home, I turn on my phone the first thing. My wife is sitting there. She's like, what's going on? I said, I don't know. Someone is telling me 100% something's going on in Israel. I just want to check it out. A minute later, my phone starts buzzing, a lot of messages, mainly from the soldiers in my unit who were under my command, assigned for reserve. Like, we knew each other. We trained together sometimes. They're like, Chaim, where are we going? What's going on? There was messages from my high-ranking officers, the guys who are in command of my team, saying, Chaim, what's going on? Why are you not responding? We're in a war. You got to come right now. And there was one guy who lives in Sderot, also my unit, that he's texting on the group chat, hey, I'm locked in my house, there's terrorists outside. It was just a whole bunch of messages, and I realized right away there's a war going on. I look at my wife, and I'm like, I really think I gotta go. And she's like, yeah, 100% for this, you gotta go. I didn't really have a lot of plans at the moment. I got into my car, picked up one set of uniform from my house, and I just drove towards JFK. I arrived at JFK about 2:30-ish, 2:33. I arrived there. I went straight to trying to find if there's an El desk or something. At this time, some of my friends were helping me talking to the Israeli consulate, and they told me that there's going to be a flight at night, Saturday night, going towards Israel. and they tried to get me on that flight. It was the first flight that left New York to Israel. I got on that flight, very, very interesting flight. I would say most, like 80% of the people on that flight were soldiers who went to fight, and people were pushing to get on the flight why they need to go first to back up. It's a very sad story that I still like. I think about it quite often. As we were, there's like the lines in the airport, people are like standing next to each other, and there's the girl standing right behind me, and then there's two guys standing the other side of the line. And I tell this girl, hey, we belong to a special forces unit. We think we should get on the plane before you. Would you mind if we get on the line in front of you? And she said, my sister was killed today in the morning. Do you mind if I go to her funeral? It was a very emotional flight. I got to Israel in the morning, Sunday morning, or Sunday midday. Straight up, my unit was already up north. Actually, our first base was at Michve Alon, where I started my service. It was very unique. That's where they got us together. We sat over there for about 2 days, organizing our equipment, and they said they need us over there to get ready if something happens up north. We should be ready for a war with Lebanon or whatever can happen on that side of the country. By Tuesday afternoon, they realized that probably it's going to be calm a little bit on the north side, and they want us to go into Gaza. So we drove down south. We were there for another 2 weeks or so. We trained every day, got my guys together, equipment, fundraised for equipment. A lot of the equipment we didn't really have in the beginning. And then we were probably one of the first groups that went into Gaza. A little after
you went into Gaza City with your soldiers?
Yes. Not Gaza City, like the Gaza Strip. The first location we went in was a area called Juharadik, which is in central of Gaza. It's about 1 kilometer in, so we walked in through central of Gaza, and we kind of opened up kind of a line in the middle of Gaza, and through us, other soldiers went in, and then we continued forward. That's what we did over there.
Can you share with us you were a couple of months in Gaza, can you share with us I know some things you cannot share, but whatever you can share with us, can you share?
In terms of findings, in terms of miracles we had, I'm not like I can go both actually. Let's do both.
In terms of what you encountered, in terms of the challenges you had.
Okay, so in terms of what we encountered, which was there's certain things you know about and you don't know about it. I mean, you can say I knew that there might be tunnels in kids' playrooms. I knew there might be, guns hidden in kids' rooms. I knew about it, but I didn't see it. Over there was the first time that I actually saw kids' rooms with tunnels going out, like from beneath them. You see paintings in a kid's room or in a school, for example, that you see they have, kids' anatomy, for example, and then you have right in between, you have paintings of terrorists with guns who died, or just like that's what they show off and that's what they look. We found booby trap, let's say a medical facility that we saw that was full-on booby trapped. We were able to see from outside that it's booby trapped, and thanks God we didn't go into that one. We were able to see tunnels from average-looking houses. You see a tunnel going under. And a very interesting way that I found also was a lot of very nice houses that I didn't think I'm going to encounter. Let's say we see certain neighborhoods are very bad, and certain neighborhoods are just beautiful neighborhoods. Really, really high-end neighborhoods with like private pools, which was an interesting combination. That's about it was very fascinating. In terms of the soldiers, it was a lot of hard work. You don't want to have too many soldiers in one house at any given time because it might be dangerous if you get hit on that house. And then at the same time, you got to have your guys working and watching everything that's going on in your house. So you kind of you work every couple of days, you switch houses, but even you work a lot by just being on guard duty, doing some kind of patrols around your house. So there's a lot of work. And what I felt easy was that let's say if you would tell me before that I'm going to have guys sleep for no more than 2-3 hours or maybe 4 hours in a row. I'm going to have to wake them up for guard duty, that it might be a hard thing after a couple of weeks, because, you know, you're not talking about 20-year-old guys. You're talking about 30, 35, between 25 to 35 for most of my guys. And I never had that issue. Everyone was super motivated to work, super understanding the reason what we do and why we do. Motivation was very high, and the workforce was good. In terms of miracles, there's a crazy story. I said it a few times already. When we went in a little later, close to the end of our first round in Gaza, we were going from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. Now, I was more in the back at the time. There's other guys more in the front. There's one guy. He's a very, very dati guy. His family grew up in the city, but they made an aliyah to Manhattan. It's afternoon, and he says, "I gotta daven mincha." You hear that story? I don't know if you heard it.
Yeah.
He says, "I gotta daven mincha." Now, because we're walking, the way we walk is
the participants. Daven mincha means he wanted to pray the afternoon service.
So as he wants to pray, the way we walk is we have the tanks and the heavy military vehicles in the front. Then we have the foot soldiers in the middle, and then I was with my guys. I had the Hammers at that time. We were a little more in the back. We had a warning that there might be terrorists, but we didn't know where, and we were just going to a different area in Gaza, more towards the inside. And because we're walking slow, this guy says, "Hey, it's mincha time, and I gotta pray." And he always, like, he's a very, very Dati guy, always prays, and he's kind of making a decision if he should wait a couple more minutes till we get to the house where we're supposed to be. We'll have easier time davening over there, or he should pray as he's walking to the house. He decides that he's not sure what time we're going to get and how busy we're going to get, so he's going to pray right where we are. Now he's in the middle of Gaza. He turns around and he says he's going to face Jerusalem to pray towards Jerusalem. He starts praying. Now, obviously, in Gaza, even though you pray, you're not going to close your eyes, right? You still have your gun, full equipment, and you pray, and he's looking around towards the back at the time. As he's praying in the middle of Shmona Esrei, which is a part of the prayer for Mincha, he sees a couple of feet away from him, the ground is shaking. He looks over there, he sees a terrorist coming out from a tunnel with an RPG towards the guys in the front. The terrorist did not see him or the guys over there. He saw more the guys in the front next to the tanks, and he's aiming his RPG on the guys in the front. It all took a second. He lifts his gun, he neutralizes this terrorist, and then we went a little bit forward. We found other terrorists in that area. And it was a crazy story to me. Like, I always knew that prayer helps, and, God is watching over us. But it was kind of a awakening call in a way to see that actually when you pray and because someone prayed, your life gets saved. Which is a crazy story, I think, at least.
Let me ask you the following. The areas of Gaza you went into. So there was an announcement that Gazan citizens should be moving and evacuating. When you go in, were there a lot of civilians, or were most of the people you encountered terrorists trying to kill you?
So depending on the neighborhoods. So most people we saw, especially my unit, were there to kill us, although they were not in Hamas uniform. Hamas does not use uniform, and you can't see. But if you see their military age guys, you know that the chance of them wanting to kill you is very high. And then we kind of looked after them, and more than once we saw that they do, come from a tunnel or go back into a tunnel, so they're terrorists. Sometimes we saw guys who passed. We have those passages that we had to open for civilians to pass, and they're passing through us. Over there, we were not allowed to do anything, but I have no doubt that there was a lot of terrorists also passed through in between civilians. One, we know from the hostages that came back that they passed in some of those passages, so we know that they were there. And the other end is, I know there was a unit not far from me that they had an encounter with 175 civilians, came towards them, lifting their hands, a bunch of women and kids in between them. And then as they got closer, 4 or 5 terrorists with machine guns opened fire on them. And unfortunately, some soldiers got killed over there. So it's always a challenge between you don't want to kill any civilians and you want to be very careful not to kill anyone who does not deserve to be killed, but you have, we're still human and we got to be careful of what we do. So it's a very hard balance.
You have a situation where the terrorists themselves are using, so to speak, they're using human shields. You saw that
all the time.
All the time.
Yes, all the time.
Just for our participants, you hear what Captain Meisels just said. All the time, the Hamas were using human shields, and you just said to us that soldiers were killed as a function of they wouldn't shoot where there were Gazan civilians, but behind those Gazan civilians, the terrorists were killing Israeli soldiers.
Right. Matter of one of my guys in my unit, his name was Michve Alon. He got killed by an IED not so long ago. I believe the IED was planted by someone who was dressed in civilian clothing. I mean, you can say because we looked at the area, we did not see any terrorists there. We saw some civilians that we did not get permission to shoot at them because they were in civilian clothing. The next day we went by there and an IED exploded and also one of my guys got killed. So I do believe that there's a lot of, when they dress up civilian clothing, it makes the war so much harder for us. And no one, it's a challenge every day.
Could you go back to what you said? You're commanding troops between the ages of 25 and 35. These are fathers, these are husbands, these are doctors, these are farmers, these are all regular civilians. They're coming back. And you've got to wake them up every 3 to 4 hours because you have to do a rotation. No one can do a guard duty for 12 hours straight just because of the intense operation. And you're doing this day in, day out, week in, wake out. What does that do to your stamina? What does that do to your strength, Captain Meisels?
It makes you a lot stronger. First of all, when you work with parents who know they're doing it for their kids, so it's like everyone around us, we're very, very motivated. First of all, to come back alive. So in order, if you want to come back alive, you got to work hard and you got to make sure you're safe and you are on top of your game when you do guard duty. And second of all, we want to have Israel a better place for our kids. So when the guys with me were fighting for Israel, they're fighting for the country that they know their kids are going to grow up in. They know the only future for the Jewish people is if we're going to have the state of Israel strong. So they do it for themselves, for their kids, and we just get motivated. You can't get more chizik than working with those type of guys. You see those guys, you see why they do it, you see the belief, the minute they have that it will be good and we will survive. And it's very interesting because you can see the most, I wouldn't say the most, but let's say guys who were protesting at Kaplan together with guys from all the different mechinot working together, and they become actual good friends. And there's no politics in Gaza, at least in my, the guys that I saw. There was no politics, no different beliefs. There was a common goal to make sure that Israel is a safe country and that Hamas can't kill any more innocent civilians. And when you work on that mindset, it's a magical mindset. You see, everyone wants to work, everyone wants to become better, wants to do their job the best as they can.
Did you lose soldiers?
I lost 2 guys in my unit. One of them his name is Michve Alon, as I said earlier. The other guy's name was Mar Levi. He's a father of 4 kids, left behind a wife and 4 kids. Very, very good guy. He was killed by something that we're not sure exactly what happened over there yet. But he was killed more in the beginning.
Your guys right now are back with their families, back working.
Yes. Yeah.
But at any time you could be called back, whether it's to Gaza, whether it's to the north. So you and your guys are prepared at any point in time.
Yes, we were called back already 3 times. So the first time we were at the beginning of the war, we did a little over 3 months. And then we did another month in Khan Yunis. And then 2 months ago, we were called up for a 3rd time to Rafah, which is the 3rd time I couldn't go. It was the day that we were called to go was the same date my wife was due, and I just couldn't do it to her. So the last time I skipped, but now everyone is ready that we're gonna go back. Hopefully, whenever they need us. We don't know if they're gonna need us or not. We believe it's gonna be the next month or two. We're gonna go back, and it's gonna be or to Gaza or to Lebanon. We don't know exactly. We're training for both.
I want to thank you. In fact, could I ask you a couple of personal questions?
Sure.
So, all of us listening to the interview, the briefing with you, it's clear you have a Brooklyn, a Hasidic accent. You can hear it in your English, etc. I'm making an assumption that your Hebrew does not sound like a kid who grew up in Beersheba or Tel Aviv. It's also got a little bit of an accent. Your soldiers can tell that you're not from Israel, that it's an American-like accent.
Right.
But they see that they hear your story. Do they have questions for you? Do they have a fascination of about your background? Because again, I want to share with our participants, it's not like you went through Netzach Yehuda and you were with soldiers who were all ultra-Orthodox, either Yeshivish or Hasidish. You are unique in the sense that you went on your own. You fought in units where the majority of the soldiers, first of all, were Israeli. The majority of the soldiers, first of all, were not necessarily from a Hasidic background. So you had a unique. Now you're a commander at this point. Okay, at this point you're a commander. Do your soldiers, are they fascinated about your story? Do they ask about your story? Do they ask about your community?
Some ask. A lot of them, I feel a lot of soldiers, like we're so busy with the work we have to get done, that if you're good at the job you do and you just communicate good with them, it doesn't really, like, if we sit in a house in Gaza and it's, there's no phones in Gaza, we barely had our phones. Most of the time we didn't. And you just schmooze. That's when it was sometimes interesting conversations about it. But that most of the time it doesn't, I don't think it affects in a big way. What I did see is in the beginning, it gave motivation to some guys that people from America came to fight. So, for example, I believe in America we have a couple of thousand guys who went after October 7th to fight in Gaza. Some came back, some didn't yet. I believe seeing Americans who came to Israel to support, to fight, other than, like, obviously the barbecues help a lot and it's a big deal and all donations people give. But when you see there's a few people who are not in Israel, don't have to be in Gaza, fighting next to them, and you see them coming to fight, I think that gives some motivation that there's the Jewish community around the world that's also there to support them and fight with them shoulder by shoulder in a way. I think that helps a lot. Yeah.
Your soldiers obviously experienced things, saw things in Khan Yunis, in Beit Hanun, in Gaza City, and other parts that you've described, things that no human being should have to encounter. They've had to deal with things. You mentioned that 2 of your soldiers were killed. The PTSD, the impact on them, what it's like when they're back with their families. Can you share some of that with us?
So I'll give you a story that happened not so long ago that you might relate to it a little bit. So one of the guys in my unit was a guy that I took one guy from America to be in like with me in Gaza. I wanted to have like one right-hand guy that I knew well, and he asked me to come into my unit. So I took him to my unit. He was in the build, like one of the times when one of my guys, when Maud Levy got killed, they were in a building and the building got hit and Maud died and a couple other guys got wounded. And this guy was in the building right next to where it happened. Baruch Hashem, his helmet got sharpened, but he came out okay. There was the earthquake about 2 months ago. I don't know if you remember, one Friday there was an earthquake in New York that it was felt.
Yeah.
He worked in construction at the time. He calls me up 5 minutes after the earthquake and he's like, Chaim, I'm in a construction site. I'm in the staircase. I don't know why the earthquake scared me and I can't get out of the staircase. I'm still here scared to get out. Anyway, you can help me. So his brain, by the earthquake, took him back to Gaza when they got hit by this explosion and I just needed help to get out. Or there's other guys. There's a lot of guys you see an everyday struggle. But I think friends and having community and having people in their community help them and kind of understand where they came from helps a lot. So in Israel, I think it's a little bit easier for the guys because you have more guys to relate. You're going to a shul or you go to a game in Israel, you probably, I would say, 15-20% of the guys there were also in Gaza and also had some type of incident. It's almost impossible that you were in Gaza for a while fighting in combat and you didn't have some kind of encounter with terrorists. The challenge that I see is for the guys, the thousands of guys who live here, and when they come back, that's where I see a big challenge now in terms of how to get back to life and find support for their PTSD.
Yeah, at FIDF, and this is something we've discussed, the Ministry of Defense and the Army has us right now funding about $90 million for PTSD. And a lot of it is for those who are in the Army, and quite a bit of it, the early detection as well as therapy. And quite a bit of it is for those who are either been discharged or veterans. But like you said, there's a whole network that we've set up, these 6 facilities. There's safe houses. If somebody has suicidal thoughts, they can go to 24/7. Hundreds of therapists are being trained in how to give proper PTSD therapy. They're being mentored, they're being managed in terms of it. And the soldiers are getting therapy like they've never had before. But that's those soldiers who are living in Israel, who are part of the system. You're describing there are soldiers who do come back to America, and they don't have that network. And we know in America, just the statistics of American vets who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, we haven't got it right. It's not a knock on the medical system here because no one has ever gotten PTSD right. What's happening now in Israel is ground changing with the medical community, with the therapeutic community, everyone working together. We happen to be the funders of it, but there's incredible work being done in the silos that divide between academia, between the therapeutic community, between the medical community, the hospital community, the Army. All those silos have come down. They're working together. They're doing incredible work. And you're saying, though, that here in the States, for those individuals that come back, they don't have that network. They don't have that system. That's very interesting, and I thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Hopefully, we'll be here one day to help them as well. Looking forward.
Can I ask you if you could share with us some last thoughts? Your perspective on the spirit of the soldiers, your perspective on the soldiers who have had to give up their jobs, like you, had to sacrifice their families to do what they've done to defend Israel, to defend the world. Share with us some last thoughts.
So, first of all, the biggest chizik that I see people who are sometimes worried about Israel and about the future. I think the biggest chizik you can get is when you talk to soldiers who actually fought in Gaza, because see, my guys, everyone is highly motivated, although we've paid a very, very heavy price, and some guys are still paying the price. If they're dealing with PTSD or other injuries, or Bachlal, quite a few of them lost their jobs. The motivation of wanting to continue to work is amazing. And the message is very clear. Israel is here to stay. We're here to be strong, and we're going to get way stronger than we are now. And we're going to win this war in that. Like, there's no doubt about it. If you talk to the guys, we're going to win. And Mirza Hashem will bring all the hostages back. Whoever is still alive, and whoever not, will try to bring peace for the family. The motivation is high. We're here to work, and we're going to continue working. And I think very soon it's going to be done. I hope as soon as we can. And people should continue praying for us, continuing to do whatever they can. Some people can donate. They should donate. And if they can't, I believe if someone can just give a 5-minute prayer for the soldiers, if that's what they can do, that's very, we appreciate that. We really, really do. As I said earlier, the Mincha story, I know we had a lot of otherism, and sometimes it may be because someone davened Mincha in the United States for us.
Just for our participants, Nisim are miracles. And the term that Captain Meisel keeps using, chizik means strength and fortitude for the soldiers. Sorry.
All good. So I believe if people pray for us, even though they're not there, or if they give a donation from their good heart to help the soldiers do their job good, I know it's helping us until now, and I know it's going to continue to help us. So if you can help in that way, that's really appreciated. And very soon it's going to be behind, I hope. And we can continue with our communities.
You just mentioned that some of your soldiers, as a function of being away, they've lost their jobs. Can you elaborate upon that?
Yeah. Some guys, when they went to on October 7th, right? They went into fight. I did 4 months in Gaza. My guys did by now 5 months because one I missed. It's very hard for them to run their job the way they did before October 7th. If the boss is half the time away or just an employee in the companies for so long away, it's very hard for them to continue working with their jobs. So some jobs, like some companies, had to fire them. And the issue is that not just they lost their job, even if they get a new one now, it's sometimes a little harder to get a new one because they know if something breaks out in Lebanon, the soldier's going to go back to fight. And most soldiers are willing to sacrifice their job and whatever there is at the time being, knowing that maybe we'll have to do another couple of months now for the future of Israel in order for us to have a good state. So it's kind of even hard for some guys to get a good new job because they might still go back. But I think the government is, people in Israel, the government is helping. Over here, there's still a lot of help that has to get done. We have a lot of guys who still don't have jobs. We have guys who are injured that have a little harder time finding jobs. There's guys, I can tell you right now, I have 15 guys who live in the United States who came back from fighting in Gaza or in Judea and Samaria, not everyone went in, that are looking for jobs in the United States that I couldn't find them the right fit yet. So there is definitely a job. Hopefully everyone will find the right job. So,
is there if someone who's listening or participating in this Zoom is looking to hire someone who is a vet like that, is there an email address or something that we can give? Not your private email address, but is there an address where people can reach out if they want to try to provide jobs?
Yes, so I can give you a Nivut email address. Would that be okay? Or
yes,
I can open another email address for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Chaim's, like CHAIM @nivut.org. And if they have companies that want to hire,
CHAIM @nevut.org.
Yes.
Repeat that. CHAIM @nevut.org. And if anyone wants to support the PTSD, what the soldiers are dealing with, FIDF.org. FIDF.org. And we want to make it very clear for the emergency campaign, the war campaign, all donations, 100% goes straight through to the soldiers, to the army. There's no overhead for that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Chaim.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
No, thank you. Listen, first of all,
Any
thank you for
other
your service. We want to wish you a mazel tov on the birth of your daughter. Please God, your wife, your daughter, they should be healthy. Please God, you should be healthy, strong, and safe. And we want to thank you for being a role model. Look, there are many people who look up to you. You're a person who's incredibly empathetic, incredibly sympathetic, incredibly warm. And at the same time, you've led men under the worst of conditions, under the most challenging of conditions. And we can't thank you enough.
Thank you. And first of all, I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll continue doing our job until we can all get back to our peaceful lives and, continue living a peaceful life. So.
And thank you for your wife. She's the real hero. She was a pregnant woman and her husband was 4 months in Gaza. And we want to thank her for her sacrifice as well.
Mm-hmm. And family and her friend, it's her friends I know that supported her. And I'm going to say, I don't know, I believe some people here who are going to listen to this have friends who served or know someone who served. If you can just call up their wife or their friend sometime because when they're in Gaza, they can't have their phone. Most guys don't have their phone in Gaza. If you can call up a friend who her husband is fighting or a son or a daughter is fighting, you can just, wish them a wonderful day or buy them a coffee sometimes. That goes far away and it really helps. So if people can do that, wherever they are, that's always a big help.
Thank you. And really, on behalf of all of us, some of us are watching this live, some of us will be watching it when it gets sent, the email gets sent out. We're honored. We're honored to learn from you. We're honored to have you representing the IDF, representing the Jewish people. And God bless you, your family, and God bless your soldiers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate it.